What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we are going to be taking a deep dive into the fight between Cutelaba and Devin Clark from a gambling perspective. I hope that you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions and hopefully even earn some extra cash. Now once this video gets 100 likes, I will be dropping the next breakdown video for UFC Fight Night Spam vs Smith card. So if you want me to drop another breakdown, hit that like button below. We'll probably do Joaquin Buckley versus Antonio Araujo next, or maybe even Ariane Lipski versus Mandy Bohm. And don't forget to check my YouTube channel for all the other breakdown videos on the other main card fights. If you'd like to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights, check out my website MMABettingTips.com and you'll find a bunch of bets on there and a whole bunch of other content for every UFC event. But for now, let's get into this fight between Cutelaba and Devin Clark, because it is one of the most interesting fights on the card. So we'll start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. Cutelaba, the slight favourite, at average odds of around 1.70, which is minus 142. Minus 143, sorry, for an implied probability of 59%. If we take a look at the odds on Devin Clark, he's currently around about a 2.20 favourite, which is plus, 2.20 underdog, which is plus 120 for an implied probability of 45%. So Cutelaba, the slight favourite here. We take a look at the tail of the tape. Devin Clark's 31 years old, 6 foot tall with a 75-inch reach, and Cutelaba, 27 years old, 6 foot 1 with a 75-inch reach. So both guys, you know, not too much of a difference in age. Both guys around about the same size. This one's very much going to come down to skills. So what's interesting about both these guys is that they both have a base in wrestling. Cutelaba, I think, was on the national Moldovan wrestling team, something like that, and Devin Clark, I believe, was a JUCO national wrestling champ. So both guys like to grapple, but I do think it would be a bad idea if Cutelaba were to try and grapple in this fight. Unfortunately for Cutelaba, he is one of these guys that does tend to get very tired very quickly when he grapples, which is a big shame because he's a big, strong, physically imposing dude that's not easy to take down, and his offensive wrestling, as we saw in his last fight against Dustin Jacoby, is pretty decent. The problem with Cutelaba is that he just can't grapple effectively for very long without gassing himself out badly. So in order for Cutelaba to do well in this matchup, he needs to use his wrestling in reverse to stuff the takedown threat of Devin Clark, keep the fight standing, where he's going to have a huge advantage over Devin Clark. If Cutelaba can keep this fight standing, I think he's going to do really well, because Devin Clark just is not a comfortable striker. He's very awkward standing, he's very bad defensively, he doesn't read his opponent very well, and he's just one of these guys that doesn't react well to being hit. He's kind of timid in striking exchanges, which means he bites on a lot of feints. You know, he overreacts to a lot of feints, and you know, this guy is very susceptible to getting knocked out, which is not good when you're facing a guy like Cutelaba, who does tend to come out the gate very aggressive in round one, does have big power in his hands, and is pretty dangerous, especially early in a fight. The one thing about Cutelaba is that he really doesn't give you time to settle. Comes out the gate very, very fast, and for a guy like Devin Clark that isn't particularly good defensively and is quite easy to hit, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Cutelaba caught Clark with something big early on and knocked him out. I feel like performance anxiety might be a real big issue for Clark, because he seems to be one of these guys that, you know, once he settles down, you know, takes a few big shots and, you know, has the first few minutes under his belt and kind of warms up a little bit. Then, you know, even if the second and third round gets pretty tough, he seems to be able to just deal with, you know, with the challenges that he's going to face in a fight. Whereas early on, this guy's very, very susceptible to making mistakes, getting caught cold, you know, finding himself in really bad positions or taking big fight-ending shots. So Clark needs to weather the early storm, which won't be easy because Cutelaba is a maniac who brings it real hard early on. That is partially one of the reasons why Cutelaba does tend to slow down a lot as the fight goes on, though. He tends to come out super aggressive in round one, burn himself out a little bit in round one, and then he's nowhere near as effective into the second and third round. So what makes Cutelaba very dangerous, you know, the fact that he doesn't give his opponents time to settle in round one, is also what is kind of his biggest weakness, because you know with this guy, if you can make it out of that first round, the second and third round becomes a lot easier, and by the third round of his fights, this guy's usually completely gassed out of his mind, and we saw that in his last fight against Dustin Jacoby, where he was struggling real bad late on in that third round. So this is an interesting fight that I think is largely going to be dictated by Ion Cutelaba's gas tank. You know, is he able to pace himself across 3 rounds, like do enough to nick the first 2 rounds and then, you know, kind of coast and survive in the third if the fight is, you know, going to go the distance? Is Cutelaba able to get out there in round 1 and then his gas tank won't even come into question? But we do really have a big risk factor with Cutelaba here because his gas tank just isn't trustworthy. And you know, if Devin Clark can make it out of that first round, if he can weather that early storm, this can become a very difficult fight for Cutelaba. And that's really, if you're interested in betting this fight this weekend, that is, you know, the biggest thing you need to consider here. Cutelaba's gas tank is not great. But we are seeing big improvements from Cutelaba, not necessarily in his gas tank, but how he paces himself. I was quite impressed in the Dustin Jacoby fight, how he didn't necessarily pace himself better than usual because he did commit a lot of energy to grappling in round 1, but he did deal a lot better with performing reasonably well when he got tired. Historically, Cutelaba has been one of these guys that when he does get tired, he kind of panics a little bit and becomes really sloppy, really hittable, really easy to take down, and just not effective at all. Because if you think about it, there's lots of fighters out there that get tired, but they can still perform, you know, somewhat effectively deeper into a fight. Cutelaba used to be one of these guys that as soon as he felt tired, he was done. You know what I mean? He just couldn't do anything effectively. What we saw from him in the Dustin Jacoby fight was that even though he was tired in that second and third round, he kept a much better poker face than usual. And his skills was, you know, his skills were still kind of serviceable into that second and third round. He didn't freak out and fold like he used to, which is notable to me because I think even if Cutelaba does get tired, he's still going to have a big advantage over Devin Clark standing. So even if Cutelaba's tired, if he can still keep the fight standing, he's got a great chance of winning this fight, even if he does gas out. One thing I've been really impressed with Cutelaba, though, is the rate at which he is improving his striking. We spoke about the fact that he came from a background in wrestling, but in terms of his striking now, he's moving a lot better. There's a lot more fluidity to his striking. His footwork is a lot better. He's much better defensively, and I think this will just, you know, widen the skill gap between these two men standing. Like I say, if Cutelaba can keep this fight standing, it should be an absolute cakewalk for him. I don't really see Devin Clark causing this guy any trouble when it comes to striking. So the real question here is, you know, how likely is it that Cutelaba is going to be able to finish Clark in round 1 and get a finish? Or, if he can't get a finish in round 1, how likely is it that he's still going to be able to grind out a decision? And to be honest with you, I do think there's a pretty good chance that he does score a round 1 knockout here. Devin Clark's striking defense is just so bad, and Cutelaba's so dangerous striking. I could definitely see Clark eating a big shot and getting put away. But instead of focusing so much on that, let's talk about worst case scenario. What are the chances Clark can win if he's able to weather that early storm? Will Cutelaba have enough gas in the tank to make it, you know, to potentially win a decision? And I think that really comes down to how hard Devin Clark is going to be able to make Ion Cutelaba work. I'd be very surprised if Cutelaba were to initiate grappling exchanges here. I think it's far more likely that Cutelaba is going to try and keep the fight standing because it just wouldn't make sense for him to try and burn himself out trying to take down such a strong wrestler like Devin Clark. So I would imagine that if this fight does go to the ground, it's because Devin Clark is trying to take Cutelaba down. Now, the stats on Devin Clark's wrestling can be a bit misleading. If you look at his UFC stats, it shows that his takedown accuracy is only 36%, which means roughly he's only managing to successfully take down his opponents with 1 in 3 takedowns that he shoots. Now, that stat to the naked eye would suggest that Devin Clark's offensive wrestling is pretty poor, but it's actually not. His double leg takedown entries are very well timed. He does a really good job of shooting in deep on his opponent's hips and upsetting their balance. I think that Devin Clark's issue is because he is such a low level striker, he doesn't always feel confident enough to kind of come forward and shoot that takedown. So a lot of the time with Devin Clark, he kind of hesitates halfway through shooting the takedown and then doesn't fully commit to it, and that takedown ends up arriving pretty high up above his opponent's hips, which means yes, his opponents do stuff a lot of his takedowns, but that tends to be more down to him not having the confidence to really shoot in deep on their legs, as opposed to him not being a very technically skilled wrestler. Because when Clark is shooting takedowns, deep in on his opponent's legs, which he has the capability to do, his deep double leg takedown entries are absolutely phenomenal, and he's a great offensive wrestler. The one problem with Devin Clark's grappling is he's not the most physically imposing grappler. So when he does take his opponents down, he doesn't have the heaviest top game. He finds it difficult to hold a lot of guys down. Now, Ion Cutelaba is one of these guys that has got pretty good takedown defense early. He is pretty difficult to hold down early. However, when he gets tired, it does become a lot easier to take him down and hold him down. So when you look at this matchup, round one is going to be very difficult for Devin Clark because he's not going to have the striking to compete with Cutelaba. He's not going to be able to stop himself from taking big shots, so he's not going to have the boxing to back Cutelaba up and deter him from coming forward. It's also not that likely that he's going to be able to take Cutelaba down in round one, and even if he does, when Cutelaba's fresh early in the fight, he's probably just going to be able to pop back up to his feet very quickly. So round one for Devin Clark is all about making this guy work hard. It doesn't matter whether Devin Clark takes Cutelaba down in round one. He just needs to force him to defend takedowns. Essentially, kind of do what Devin Clark did to Alonzo Menefield. We've seen Devin Clark employ this strategy in the past. Alonzo Menefield is a big, strong, physically imposing dude with incredible takedown defense. Very difficult to get Menefield down early in a fight when he's fresh. But Devin Clark spent a lot of time trying to wear on Menefield in the clinch in that fight, which eventually paid dividends in the second half of the fight when Menefield started to slow down. And it became easier to take him down, easier to, chip away at him in the clinch. This fight is going to be hell for Devin Clark early, but if he can employ the same strategy that he used against Devin Clark, to just shoot takedowns on Cutelaba, drive him into the cage, force him to defend takedowns against the cage, wear on him a little bit in the clinch. If he can do a lot of this in round one, it will pay dividends into that second and third round when Cutelaba becomes tired, easier to take down and easier to hold down. But it's not going to be easy for Clark because he's going to be in so much danger in round one, where Cutelaba is going to be trying to punch a hole in his head. So it's an interesting fight, this, a very, very interesting fight. I definitely lean towards Ion Cutelaba simply because all fights start standing, or all rounds start standing, and Cutelaba's got such a big edge striking. I do think that's very important. On top of that, like I've said, Cutelaba is difficult to take down, difficult to hold down in round one, which means round one is going to be absolute hell for Clark. And we know he's not the best in terms of his boxing defense, so good chance Cutelaba catches him with something big in round one. And on top of that, Devin Clark, like we said earlier on in the breakdown, can be pretty timid standing and sometimes doesn't have the confidence to really commit to takedowns and shoot in on his opponents. So if Clark doesn't come out here and really, pursue that takedown aggressively in round one and force Cutelaba to work, Cutelaba may not burn through enough energy in round one to get tired enough in rounds 2 and 3 for Clark to swing momentum in his favour and use his wrestling in rounds 2 and 3 to win a decision. So it's a very interesting fight. I definitely lean towards Cutelaba, but it's not a safe bet by any means, because if you do bet on Cutelaba as a slight favourite, you are betting on a guy with a pretty bad gas tank, and we have seen Clark utilise the exact game plan he needs to use against Cutelaba effectively against Alonzo Menefield. So we know that Devin Clark has the blueprint on how to beat Cutelaba. It's just whether he can go out there and actually do it, knowing how dangerous Cutelaba is in round one. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Bang 100 likes on this video for me, and we will drop the next breakdown video tomorrow. And on top of that, please check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, for breakdown videos on all the prelim fights on this card, as well as a bunch of UFC bets for every single UFC event. Take care. Thank you for watching. Love you guys. I'll see you all very soon.